The sharp, stinging scent of antiseptic jolted me awake, but my eyes were welded shut. Seriously? What fresh hell is this? All I did was get off work late last night, feel too lazy to cook, and pop a sad-looking frozen pizza in the oven. How did that land me in the hospital? Before I could puzzle it out, a flood of memories that weren't mine rushed into my brain. What the hell? Did I just wake up inside a story? Sifting through the new memories, I had to accept the insane truth. I had woken up inside the terrible web series I was watching last night. Last night, I'd gotten out of my coding job at a ridiculously late hour, and my inner sloth won out. I nuked a frozen pepperoni pizza for dinner. While waiting for it to cool, I pulled up some trashy web series to kill time. The plot was pure melodrama. The main character starts as this untouchable genius. His parents are loaded. He's a brilliant academic, a top-tier tech guru in the booming AI semiconductor industry, holding a portfolio of game-changing patents. But then, for reasons I still can't fathom, he starts simping for the female lead, Isabella, and funnels his entire family fortune into propping up her family's failing corporation. After his parents die, he goes to work for her company, becoming her fiancée and, for all intents and purposes, a live-in employee. The story hits its peak when, at the scene of his own car crash, the main character overhears his fiancée talking. She admits she orchestrated the accident to cripple him and plans to have his vas deferens severed. Also, she and her first love can pass off their own child as his heir and secure the family fortune. After suffering through an epic, tear-jerking period of abuse from Isabella and her ex, the protagonist finally leaves her, only to immediately start simping for two other women. And believe it or not, it works. He wins one of them over. Then, of course, Isabella has a sudden epiphany that she loves him, not her old flame. She's filled with regret. The guy then uses his new conquest to make Isabella jealous, finally succeeding in getting the reaction he wanted. At that point, my pizza was ready and I started eating, but with every bite, a sour taste grew in my mouth. A feeling of profound disgust. Here was a man with every advantage in the world, acting like a complete doormat. A slight push, and he'd cough up blood. For the sake of his simping career, he'd generously thrown his parents, his fortune, his education, and his own health on a sacrificial altar just to win a woman's approval. Even though he eventually found a new heiress to latch onto, I found myself wishing he'd simp his way into oblivion. Fuming, I finished the entire pizza in a fit of rage. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, but I distinctly remember devouring the whole thing. And then I woke up like this. I was in the story. I was the simp protagonist, Ethan Hayes. I was lying in a hospital bed, about to be taken in for surgery to have my vas deferens severed. I could hear the low murmur of doctors nearby. They'd be starting the procedure soon. I was probably already drugged, but I bit down on my tongue hard. The sharp pain gave me a moment of clarity. My hands fumbled around the bed. I remembered the protagonist in the show calling his old college friend for help. His phone had to be here. Why they let a phone into a pre-op room, I had no idea, but the show was full of plot holes like that. My fingers finally closed around the smooth, cool case of a smartphone. I blindly fumbled with the screen. A voice answered on the other, and almost immediately, 911, what's your emergency? Thank God. I got on the first try. I need to report a crime, I rasped. I'm in the intensive care surgical unit at Vance Medical Center. My life is in danger. I was in a car accident this morning and brought here, but they haven't given me any real treatment. I think they're trying to kill me through negligence. I need a transfer. I paused, catching my breath. My name is Ethan Hayes. I'm an AI semiconductor architect. If you can get me transferred to another hospital within the next 30 minutes, I will sign over all of my patents related to AI chip design to the city of Emerald City, free of charge. Please hurry. The anesthetic was pulling me back under. Before I could finish, my strength gave out, and I slipped back into a forced, powerless sleep. Please, let them get here in time. 2. Mr. Hayes? Mr. Hayes? The 911 operator realized she'd lost me. She immediately dispatched a patrol car from the nearest precinct to check out the situation at the hospital. If her officers confirmed my story, they had instructions to intervene. Next, she escalated the call to her superiors. Right now, anything related to the AI industry was a top priority for the city government. The AI economy was the next big boom, and no city official wanted to get left behind. My offer to donate my patents was a bombshell she couldn't ignore. When the police commissioner, Mr. Davis, heard the report, he immediately pulled up my file. It didn't take him long to see that my credentials and the work I'd produced were the real deal. I was an asset worth taking seriously. He started driving to the hospital himself, while simultaneously briefing the mayor's office. Back in the operating room, my 911 call had thrown everyone into a state of shock. The lead surgeon, a man named Dr. Mark Riley, was a close friend of my fiancée, Isabella Vance. None of them could believe that I'd managed to call the police at this stage, or why I would even think to. With police on the way, the procedure Isabella had ordered was off the table. They couldn't risk it. They were trapped. Less than 10 minutes later, the doors to the operating room were forced open. The police were not playing around. They came in hot, claiming the hospital was engaged in the persecution of a vital national asset. Faced with that kind of accusation, the hospital administration folded instantly and let them in. The officer in charge was a captain named Frank Miller. He strode into the room and demanded, "Where is Mr. Ethan Hayes?" All eyes turned to me on the bed. Dr. Riley, looking pale, stepped forward. "That's Ethan Hayes right there. Is he unconscious? Can you wake him up?" Miller needed to know what was going on, and fast. "Yes, he's just under anesthesia." Dr. Riley prepped a syringe with a reversal agent and injected it into my foreline. While they waited for me to come to, Commissioner Davis himself arrived in the OR. Don't ask how a major hospital's sterile operating room suddenly had an open-door policy. The web series I was in was just that magical. Secret labs, secure facilities, people walked in and out like it was a coffee shop. Davis got a quick rundown from Captain Miller and waited. The orders he'd received were clear. If I was who I claimed to be, a person of significant value and influence in the AI sector, they were to accommodate any reasonable request I made. The city was desperate for talent like me. An opportunity like this, dropped right in their lap, was not to be wasted. As the drugs wore off, the first thing I saw was the crisp blue uniforms of Captain Miller and Commissioner Davis. A wave of relief washed over me. "You're here. Thank God. Thank you. No need to thank us, Mr. Hayes. We're just doing our jobs," Commissioner Davis said humbly. "But we do need you to explain the situation again." Your call was cut short. "Of course," I said, my voice getting stronger. "My name is Ethan Hayes. I'm currently the lead AI architect for Vance Industries. I hold numerous patents, which are currently licensed to their corporation. This morning, I was in a severe car crash. I haven't received any meaningful medical attention since I arrived. I have reason to believe this was deliberate, an attempt on my life. I'm requesting an immediate transfer to a hospital you trust, somewhere I can be treated safely. In exchange for ensuring my absolute security while I recover, I will transfer ownership of all my patents to the city." I lay my cards on the table. With the city government in my corner, no one in Emerald City could touch me. Of course, that required me to have something the city wanted. "Very well, Mr. Hayes. We'll verify everything you've told us," the commissioner said after a moment's thought. "We'll also launch a full investigation into your car accident. For now, we're transferring you to the Federal Medical Center at Fort Williams that I assure you, you'll get the best possible care there, and no one will be able to bother you." I thanked them again, feeling the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. 3. I spent the next several weeks recovering at the federal hospital. As soon as the transfer was complete and my initial surgeries were done, I made good on my promise and signed over the patents. City Hall was ecstatic. They told me to focus on my recovery and that they would have a significant position waiting for me when I was well. I knew I had found my patron. My technology would bring a massive windfall to the city, and they knew it. But they didn't just take the patents for free. They set up a generous royalty agreement, ensuring I would get a significant share of the profits. In that single gesture, they showed more integrity than my so-called fiancée ever had. The city wasn't stupid. They knew my value wasn't just in my existing work, but in the innovations yet to come. By treating me well, they were investing in a long-term, profitable relationship. They even offered me a choice for my future, a role in public policy, a lead research position at a state-funded institute, or their full backing to start my own company. If I chose the latter, the city would be the majority shareholder to prevent asset stripping, but I would have complete operational and technical control. With my patents now belonging to the city, Vance Industries could no longer collect licensing fees from other companies. Their flagship products instantly lost their competitive edge, and a huge chunk of their revenue vanished overnight. Without me at the helm, the company's R&D department ground to a halt. There were no new innovations, no new engines for growth. A grim atmosphere settled over Vance Industries. My ex-fiancée, Isabella Vance, was furious. She hurled another brand-new coffee mug against our office wall, where it shattered into 1,000 pieces. Ethan, is that all you people can say?" she screamed at her head of R&D. "Without Ethan Hayes, are you all completely useless? I pay you millions of dollars a year. For what, exactly?" The R&D lead, a man named Mr. Peterson, could only state the facts. "Ms. Vance, it's not that we're useless. It's that Mr. Hayes' chip architecture is light years ahead of anything else. We can't follow his logic without him here to lead the project. We could develop a chip that's a generation behind his, but what's the point? His superior architecture is already on the market. Who would buy an inferior product?" He slid a thick folder across her desk. "Therefore, we can't solve the problem you've given us. The entire R&D team is resigning. These are letters. Please accept them." Isabella stared at the stack of resignations, feeling the air leave her lungs. All this because I got rid of a simp, because I had him bumped in a car, because I wanted him to help raise my child with my first love. She couldn't believe the consequences were this severe. Her company was not only on the verge of bankruptcy, but it was now technologically irrelevant. Several top executives had already jumped ship. If R&D walked out, the company was finished. No new products meant a slow, inevitable death. When Ethan was there, the pipeline of innovation never stopped. She'd never had to worry about it. Now that he was gone, she was nothing. For weeks, she hadn't eaten or slept properly. Her plan had been so simple: cripple Ethan, then swoop in as a savior and marry him anyway. He would be so grateful he would take care of her and her daughter, and he would continue to work tirelessly for the company. But nothing had gone according to plan. Would it all go wrong? She didn't know, but she knew the turning point was the car crash. What exactly happened that day? And where was Ethan now? It was still a mystery, but it all went down at her family's hospital. She refused to believe she couldn't find the truth. She would have to apply more pressure, interrogate more people. Hiring an expert to recover the hospital's wiped security footage was now a top priority. A sharp pain pulsed in her temple. "Mr. Peterson," she said, her tone softening, "I apologize for my attitude. Please, ask the team to hold off on resigning. Just give me a few more days. I'll find Ethan. I'll bring him back. You of all people know our relationship. I'll just have to sweet-talk him a little. He'll come back, right?" Mr. Peterson considered the dynamic he'd witnessed between me and Isabella for years. He seemed to think it was plausible. "All right, Ms. Vance. We can wait one more month. But the fact remains, we can't produce anything of value right now. If he's not back by then, we'll have no choice but to leave." He picked up the folder of resignations and left her office. Isabella rubbed her temples, a new resolve hardening in her eyes. She needed to see Dr. Riley again. He absolutely knew what happened that day. She had no more patience for business. She made a few calls, gathered a group of men, and headed for the hospital. This time, she would get the truth out of Mark Riley, no matter what it took. She told herself she wouldn't have resorted to this if her back wasn't against the wall. He was a good friend, and their families went way back, but her entire world was collapsing. She and her men arrived at Dr. Riley's office and promptly cleared the room of everyone else. With the door closed, only the doctor and Isabella's imposing security team remained. "Mark," she said, her voice cold as ice, "our friendship means a lot to me, but my company is on life support. If you don't tell me exactly what happened that day, and where Ethan is now, I can't afford to be your friend anymore." "Isabella, I really can't say anything. I'm scared." "Dr. Riley pleaded, trying to distance himself from the disaster. He knew everything, but he was terrified of the repercussions. Isabella gritted her teeth. "Then there's nothing more to talk about. Boys, break one of his legs. Help Dr. Riley loosen up a bit." For large men moved toward him. Seeing that she was dead serious, Mark's resolve crumbled. Isabella looked like she was truly at the end of her rope. "Wait, don't. I'll talk." But the men didn't stop. They slammed him to the floor and began to rough him up. Just as one was about to bring his boot down hard on Riley's shin, Isabella held up a hand. "Stop." She looked down at the terrified doctor. "Now, are you ready to talk?" "I'll talk," he whimpered. The police had warned him to keep his mouth shut, but Isabella was unhinged. If he didn't talk, he might not live to see tomorrow. He knew exactly how ruthless the woman standing over him could be. This was the woman who was willing to maim her own fiancé for the sake of her illegitimate daughter. Ethan was transferred to the Federal Medical Center at Fort Williams. Riley choked out, then fell silent. Isabella had her answer. She and her men turned and walked out, leaving the doctor trembling on the floor. I was in the middle of a physical therapy session with Captain Miller spotting me. I had insisted that Miller stay on as my personal security detail. I knew Isabella had arranged the crash, but her people had covered their tracks perfectly, even producing a fall guy to take the blame. Officially, the case was closed. Commissioner Davis thought I was being paranoid, assuring me that the federal hospital was impenetrable, especially with the extra layers of security he'd put on my wing. But I held firm, telling him I wouldn't cooperate with my recovery unless Miller stayed. The commissioner finally relented. Thanks to the top-tier care I was receiving, my recovery was progressing much faster than it had for my counterpart in the web series. In that timeline, I'd still be getting tormented and abused, with no time for proper healing. "Ethan," as I took a slow, deliberate step, I heard Isabella's voice behind me. I stopped and shot a knowing look at Captain Miller. His face turned a shade of green, but he had to concede. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a spent shell casing that had been polished and engraved, and slapped it into my palm. "I bet, Sabit. It's yours." I smiled and pocketed my prize without a word. "Ethan, why aren't you talking to me?" Isabella demanded, her voice rising as I ignored her. She couldn't stand being invisible to me. I glanced at Miller again. He sighed and gave a sharp, frustrated wave of his hand. Instantly, two uniformed federal officers emerged from an adjacent room. Without a word, they took Isabella by the arms and began escorting her out. She tried to struggle, but they were professionals. They swiftly and unceremoniously deposited her outside the hospital's main gate. Miller immediately went to the security monitors, trying to figure out how she'd even gotten into my restricted area. "How, Ethan?" he muttered, scrolling through the footage. "How did you know she'd get past 3 separate checkpoints to reach your room? Our security protocols are airtight. I just had a feeling she'd try to harm me again," I said with a shrug. "As for how she got in, aren't you figuring that out right now?" The answer, when Miller found it, was both simple and infuriating. Isabella had used a crude but effective strategy. She'd arrived with a large group of people, an elderly man in a wheelchair, a heavily pregnant woman, a mother with a crying baby. At each security checkpoint, one of them would create a diversion, faking a medical emergency or asking for help. The soldiers and guards at the federal facility, trained to assist, would get distracted, and in the confusion, Isabella and the rest of her group would slip through to the next checkpoint. She also played on her existing connection to me, telling the nurses she was still my fiancée, just there to check on me. Overcome with sympathy, a nurse had happily told her my room number. She had weaponized the decency of the military personnel to breach their defenses. Miller was furious. He apologized profusely, admitting it was a major failure on their part. He filed a report with his superiors, knowing that heads would roll. Their protection detail had failed. Fortunately, Isabella hadn't come with violent intent this time, and no harm was done. But what if she had been? What if a real assassin had used the same tactic? The potential consequences were unthinkable. In the end, the incident was a valuable, if embarrassing, lesson. Isabella's stunt exposed a critical flaw in their security, a blind spot they could now correct. Both the military base and the city police department immediately convened expert panels to overhaul their protocols. Captain Miller was officially reprimanded. It was a clear case of dereliction of duty, no matter how unexpected the method. But there was no time for self-pity. They learned their lesson and beefed up security. After that, Isabella never got close to me again. My phone was basically a paperweight now, used only for browsing news. I needed to focus completely on my recovery. A few weeks later, I could finally manage my daily life on my own. It was time to remind everyone of my value, to prove that the extraordinary treatment I was receiving was a worthy investment. It was time to get back to work. I chose to partner with the city and start a new company. I wasn't looking for a handout, nor was I arrogant enough to think I could do it all alone. I structured the deal so I would come in as a partner with my intellectual property, retaining a significant equity stake and one non-negotiable condition. I had absolute authority on all technical matters. The city was pleased with my reasonable approach and readily agreed. After all, my reputation preceded me. Every tech firm in Emerald City, and indeed across the country, knew my designs were among the most advanced in the world. While my body was still mending, the city and Captain Miller handled all the administrative work of setting up the company. My main task was to build a new team. I had two options. First, I could recruit fresh talent, bright young minds from Emerald City University. The upside was that a new team would be energetic and full of unconventional ideas that could lead to unexpected breakthroughs. The downside was their lack of experience, which would inevitably lead to costly mistakes and delays. The second option was to reassemble an experienced team, like the one I'd worked with at Vance Industries. The advantage was that they could hit the ground running and start generating revenue almost immediately. The disadvantage was that a veteran team was often full of office politicians, people more concerned with hierarchy and relationships than with pure innovation, which could bog down progress. I was torn. Miller found me staring blankly at the wall, lost in thought. "Something on your mind, Nostradamus?" he quipped. "What's got you so worked up?" I knew Miller held a bit of a grudge against me. My uncanny predictions about the case had made him look foolish, and he'd lost a fair number of bets to me as a result. If it weren't for his duty to protect me, and the fact that he genuinely seemed to like me, he probably would have decked me by now. His sarcastic jabs were his only outlet. I explained my dilemma. To my surprise, he burst out laughing. "Seriously? You, the great psychic, are stuck on this. It's not rocket science, Ethan. Why does it have to be one or the other?" He leaned back in his chair. "Hire some of the new kids and some of the old pros. Create a blended team. Problem solved. Hell, once the company is making money, you can fund two separate teams if you want." Damn it. He was right. Turns out police captains aren't idiots. I realized that without my knowledge of the story's plot, I was no match for these people in the real world. Still, I couldn't let him have the last word. "Of course. A brilliant deduction, Captain. For that, I'll go easy on you in our next bet." Miller's smile vanished. "Who said anything about another bet? I'm done betting with you. The man who bets with you is a fool. I've got nothing left to lose." Seeing him so worked up, I couldn't resist pushing a little more. "Hey, Captain Miller, hypothetically, if you arrested someone and they were sent to a maximum security prison, could they ever escape?" He didn't even have to think about it. "Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Once you're in the system, you don't get out." I grinned. "But what if someone did?" He looked at me like I was an idiot. "It's not going to happen. With modern technology, once you're behind those walls, you're there to stay. If someone actually broke out of one of our prisons, I'd run 3 miles naked through downtown." He was taking the bait. "Captain, that's a bit extreme," I said, trying to sound reasonable. "Besides, once they're in prison, it's not your jurisdiction. A breakout wouldn't be your fault. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. I trust my colleagues in the corrections department." "It won't happen," he insisted. He narrowed his eyes. "Wait a minute. You're not about to tell me you've had another one of your feelings, are you? You think someone's going to escape?" He leaned forward, a glint in his eye. "Because if that's what you're about to say, I'd be willing to make one more bet." I never turned down a sure thing. I rolled my eyes at the poor guy. I decided to let it go. I was afraid he'd have a complete breakdown if he actually had to follow through on that threat. "Captain," I said, changing the subject, "the new company is almost ready to launch. All we need is the core technical team. For anyone else, that would be the hardest part. For me, it's the easiest. I'm the core," I stated simply, "but I need a team. Please notify Emerald City University that I'll be on campus next week to recruit. Also, I have a list of a few people from my old team I trust. Can you have someone reach out to them, see if they're interested in coming aboard?" I jotted down the names and contact information of the few engineers at Vance Industries who had always been loyal to the work, not the politics. Whether they came or not was up to them. It wasn't a deal breaker. Backed by the city, I could attract talent from anywhere. Miller took the list and went to make the calls. I leaned back and began mapping out the future. The new company launched without much public fanfare, but within the tech industry, it was an earthquake. The fall of Vance Industries was now a foregone conclusion. This time, there would be no one to bail them out. My health returned, and I threw myself into my work. Under my leadership, we unveiled a new generation of AI chips that sent shockwaves through the market. The economic pie was so massive that the city government voluntarily offered partnerships to dozens of local manufacturing and software firms. The rising tide of our success lifted the entire region, creating jobs and prosperity. Vance Industries eventually declared bankruptcy. On my recommendation, the city acquired most of its assets. The corporation had solid infrastructure. With new leadership and a clear direction, it could be turned around and made profitable again. In the process, I legally recovered the funds my parents had invested to save the Vance family years ago. As a gesture of goodwill, the city awarded me an additional block of shares in my new company. I accepted them. Isabella tried to contact me countless times, but I never saw her. The security detail the city provided remained in place, and they were incorruptible. They weren't bodyguards motivated by a paycheck or personal loyalty. They were professionals driven by the mission. Success was expected. Failure was a permanent stain on their record. No matter what tricks or emotional appeals Isabella tried, they were unmoved. Their only job was to keep her away from me. Blocked from any direct access, Isabella took her campaign online. She began posting a series of desperate, rambling pleas on social media. She shed all pretense of pride, declaring her undying love for me and insisting that marrying me was all she ever wanted. She claimed her methods had been wrong, but her heart was true. She insisted she shouldn't have tried to appease her ex-boyfriend, who she falsely claimed had also helped her family during their crisis, by trying to force me to raise their child. In her posts, she publicly disowned her ex, her child, and even her parents, claiming she would give up everything just to have me back. It was a dramatic performance, but ultimately a hollow one. If I took her back, she would lose nothing. She would instantly regain access to my wealth and reputation. All she was really giving up was a group of parasites who had been bleeding her dry. I remained indifferent. I let her scream into the digital void and focused on my work. Her desperation escalated. She posted a new threat online. If I didn't agree to meet with her one last time, she would destroy the heirlooms my parents had left for my future wife. I still didn't flinch. Even if they were solid gold, what did it matter? I knew how these melodramatic plots worked. If you chase after the threatened heirlooms, you never get them back intact. There's always another trap, another emotional manipulation. I wasn't walking into that. But while I was content to ignore her, the city was not. My public spat with Isabella was becoming a PR nuisance. They couldn't legally silence her, as she was technically a private citizen who had lost everything. They urged me to meet with her one last time to resolve the situation and put an end to the spectacle. Reluctantly, I agreed, but I had conditions. I demanded the entire meeting be recorded with full surveillance. I chose the location myself, a neutral, secure site that my team then modified to my specifications. We ran no fewer than 10 drills, planning for every possible contingency. Only then did I extend an invitation to Isabella. When Isabella received my message, she was overjoyed. She quickly gathered the heirlooms and rushed to the meeting place. What she didn't know was that her parents and her ex-lover, with her daughter in tow, had followed her. The moment they appeared at the entrance to the property, they were intercepted by my security team, bundled into an unair-conditioned van, and told to wait quietly. The city had honored most of my requests, but they drew the line at having a camera crew in the room. They settled for high-definition security cameras instead. Isabella walked in, her eyes shining. "Ethan, my love." She started to rush toward me. I remained seated, calmly pressing a button on the table in front of me. A thick sheet of bulletproof glass rose silently from the floor, sealing the space between us. The color drained from her face, replaced by a flush of red-hot anger. "Ethan, what is the meaning of this?" "Isabella," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "There's nothing left between us. If the city wasn't worried about your public meltdowns, I wouldn't be here. Say what you have to say. This is the last time we will ever see each other." "I mean that," I added, "and stop calling me your love. It's disgusting." You have a family. Leave me out of it. Her agitation grew. No, Ethan, it's not like that. They were a mistake. You're the only one I've ever truly loved. You have to believe me. I was speechless at her capacity for self-delusion. Stop lying to yourself, Isabella. The car crash. Wasn't it your plan to have your ex take my place as the groom and legitimize your child's place in the family? And my parents, I continued, my voice rising. If they hadn't poured their resources into saving your family, driven by my foolish devotion to you, they might still be alive today. Instead, I ended up a broken man about to be mutilated in your hospital. If I hadn't made a desperate deal with the city, what would I be right now? Did you ever stop to think about that? Would you have spent the rest of your life with me then? Would your family have allowed it? Did you think I only exist to serve your needs? Seeing my rage, Isabella shook her head frantically. No, my love, that's not how it was. I never thought things would turn out this way. I laughed, a cold, bitter sound. You didn't think, but you still hired the man who drove the car into me. You still instructed Dr. Riley to sever my vast deference. How dare you sit there and ask me to take you back? Wake up, Isabella. It's over. I had someone crash into you, yes, but I never meant for you to go without treatment, she argued desperately. And I told Mart to do the procedure, but he didn't go through with it, did he? So no harm done. We still have a connection, don't we? Look. She opened her bag and pulled out several pieces of jewelry. These were from your parents. A gift for their future daughter-in-law. They approved of me. I wasn't interested in the jewelry. I had what I needed. I pressed another button. Moments later, Captain Miller entered the room with several officers. Did you get all that? I asked him. Is it enough to put her away? We got all. Loud and clear. And on video, Miller said, his eyes filled with a complicated mix of pity and awe. With this confession and a little more evidence, we can easily charge her with conspiracy to commit murder. Given the malicious nature of the crime, she's looking at a minimum of 3 years. He had never imagined this was how I planned to solve the problem. I didn't care. The ends justified the means. Isabella stared in disbelief at the handcuffs being snapped onto her wrists. It felt surreal. All she wanted was to talk to me, to beg for my forgiveness. She never imagined she'd be talking herself into a prison cell. Her eyes, full of pain, locked on mine. Ethan, are you really this cruel? I nodded, feeling nothing. We're all adults here, Isabella. You have to take responsibility for your actions. I hope you use your time to reflect. Don't fight the system. Maybe you'll get out early for good behavior. With a wave of my hand, Miller led her away. A few days later, Isabella Vance was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Her crimes were deemed especially heinous. Even though she cooperated after her arrest, providing evidence against her co-conspirators, it did little to reduce her sentence. It wasn't a voluntary confession. It was an admission of guilt after being caught red-handed. The driver and the doctors involved all received sentences of their own. Even though Dr. Riley hadn't performed the surgery, his inaction in the face of a crime, a violation of both his medical oath and the law, was a crime in itself. The court made an example of them all. With Isabella in prison, her family and her ex-lover's lives fell apart. The meal ticket was gone, and none of them had any useful skills. They ended up homeless, living under a bridge and scrounging for food. My life, in contrast, was peaceful and productive. I poured myself into my research. As for romance, I'd given up on it entirely. In this bizarre, fictional world, the cost of emotional attachment was too high, the risks too great. My new life was more than enough. The city gave me maximum freedom and assigned a dedicated support team to handle all my logistical needs. If I wanted to travel, consult with other industry leaders, or simply take a vacation, the city footed the bill. I was content, and, most importantly, I was safe. Then, one day, I had to attend a conference downtown. An important scientist from D.C. was in town, and my attendance was non-negotiable. The moment I stepped out of my front door, a prickle of unease ran down my spine. I immediately called Captain Miller. I didn't feel comfortable leaving until he arrived. "All right, Nostradamus, what's the emergency this time?" he asked, exasperated, as he pulled up. I ignored his sarcasm and put on the bulletproof vest he'd brought. Only then did I feel a little better. "No time for jokes," I said. "Something's going to happen today. If it wasn't for this meeting, I wouldn't be leaving the house." I got in the car with Miller, and our small motorcade set off. We had a two-pronged convoy, two identical sets of 3 black sedans, taking different routes. Halfway to the convention center, Miller's phone rang. He listened for a moment, then his voice exploded. What? Isabella Vance is gone. She's in a maximum security prison. How could she be gone? I calmly patted his shoulder. Don't worry, Captain. If I'm not mistaken, we'll be seeing her very soon. Miller looked like he was about to yell at me, but then a horrifying thought dawned on him. His face went pale. So, does this mean I have to run naked for 3 miles? I couldn't help but let out a laugh. Captain, I'd completely forgotten about that. Screech. Suddenly, all the cars in our convoy slammed to a halt. We were in the last car. Miller and I leaned forward to see what was happening. A large truck had cut off the lead car in our group. The driver's door of the truck flew open and Isabella's ex-boyfriend jumped out, brandishing a large knife. He ran toward the lead car, screaming, Ethan Hayes, you're nothing but a pathetic simp. Why you get to have such a good life? I'm going to kill you today. Just as he lunged toward the car he thought I was in, a slim figure darted out from a nearby alley, moving to intercept him. At the same time, my security detail sprang into action. 2 agents were already out of their cars. They drew their weapons. Pop, pop. 2 shots, precisely aimed, hit the man's hand. The knife clattered to the pavement, and he was tackled to the ground. The slim figure who had tried to step in front of him was, of course, Isabella. Miller walked over and, for the second time, snapped a pair of handcuffs on her wrists. He didn't even bother asking how she'd escaped from prison. At this point, nothing surprised him anymore. This was just another Tuesday. Someone at the Bureau of Prisons would have to write a very long report, and a few people would probably lose their jobs. Isabella tried to say something to me, but I had no interest in hearing it. I gave a slight shake of my head and settled back into my seat. I had never paid much attention to Isabella's ex. I assumed he was irrelevant. But now he'd forced my hand. My status in the city was not merely ceremonial. The justice system moved with terrifying speed. For the attempted murder of a person deemed a critical national asset, his sentence was swift and severe, death by lethal injection, to be carried out immediately. Isabella had another 5 years added to her sentence for the prison escape. No one spoke up for them. Sometime later, the bodies of her parents and her young daughter were found under the bridge they called home. The cause of death was never officially determined, but none of that concerned me. All I wanted was to live out my days in this strange new world in peace. At the very least, I hoped I wouldn't die over something as stupid as a frozen pizza.